Hello and welcome along to Curious About Our Planet from Glasgow Science Centre. My name is Ross and today we are joined by the wonderful folks over at Edinburgh Zoo for a live tour of their rhinos, which allows us to get up close and personal from the comfort of your home, your classroom, or wherever you might be just now. We're going to see a short video first from the zoo, and that will be followed by a live Q&A session from Jess, who is waiting patiently in the wings with the rhinos just now. Please enjoy the video and we'll see you all again for a live Q&A in a few minutes. If you do have any questions that you do think of whilst you're watching the video, please feel free to put them into the YouTube comments section, or if you want to, you can tweet us the questions at GSC1 on Twitter as well. We'll see you again in a few minutes. Please enjoy.
Hello everyone and welcome to our rhino enclosure here at Edinburgh Zoo. My name's James and I'm here with our lovely Jamie, who's one of our rhino keepers. So Jamie, can you introduce us to our two lovely boys behind us?
Yeah, so we've got two Indian one-horned rhinos here at Edinburgh Zoo. So over on the right we have Khabib and on the left we have Sanjay. They are 4 and 5 years old and they've been with us for a few years now.
So with these guys being so big, how do we work with them? Because you can't just suddenly shift them into one part of the enclosure and shift them again. So how do you work with them?
Yeah, so these guys are one of the species which we don't work in the enclosure with. So I myself work in the hoofstock section. We do work in with most of our species, but this is one of the exceptions. Because as you can see, these guys are huge. And being only 4 and 5, these guys have still got a lot of growing to do. These guys can reach a weight of about 2.5 tons once they reach full size. And because of that, we just simply can't go with them because they don't know their own strength. So basically, if you were to go in there, like if they were to tap you, that would be enough to injure you quite severely. So if you look around the enclosure, you can see just up behind the rhinos, we've got slides everywhere. So all of the slides around the enclosure can be operated from the outside. And if we do need to move them around, generally we can call them. They do respond to their name. Or also if we are struggling, a little bit of food, a little food reward is usually just enough just to move them where we want them to be.
So they very much march on their stomachs then. So what sort of food do they love then?
Yeah, so these guys, they are herbivores. So these guys are what we call a browser. So I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. But these guys have got a very pointed, flexible lip, which I think Khabib's about to demonstrate, so you can see it just there.
Oh,
so
brilliant.
that is perfect, Khabib, well done. So basically these guys, they're what we call a browser. So what I mean by this is these guys, rather than eating grass, which would be a grazer, these guys have got this flexible lip, which is a very adaptable mouthpiece, which used to grab onto the branches, strip all the leaves, and they can use it to eat the branches as well. So out in the wild, these guys will eat hundreds and hundreds of species of plants all day long. These guys can clear a very large area of land in a short period of time, and they are very important. This is one of their natural purposes, basically, is out in the world. They're basically natural landscape gardeners. They'll clear lots of plants, lots of areas, and what this means is that all the other plants in that habitat, they can then grow and thrive as well. Here at the zoo, though, unfortunately, we don't have 200 odd species of plants. We can give them what we have, though, so we cut them browse daily, not so much during winter. So in winter, we give them bamboo, but then during the summer, we give them what we call browse. So this can basically be parts of trees from all around the park. We've got hundreds of acres here up the back, lots and lots of trees which we can use, and things such as sycamore, willow, hazel, you name it, these guys get it. We also get a little bit of a food reward as well, things such as banana and carrot if we're training them. And to bulk them out, they get lots of hay as well. So these guys can easily eat 2 or 3 bags of pellets and about 2 to 3 bales of hay every single day.
Now, it's always the common joke that what zookeepers do most of all, day in, day out, is obviously pick up poo. Now, the types of animals I used to look after, lots of our small animals, whether it be things like our armadillos or our reptiles. But Jamie, you've got back-breaking work to do, so we're cleaning out these guys. Just how much they produce?
So these guys, they are essentially bottomless pits, and all that food does come out the other end. So we can easily be taking out hundreds of kilos every single day. We can take out up to 3 or 4 wheelbarrows, so it's very, very back-breaking cleaning out these guys.
They've got a pool inside. Now, what's special about that pool?
Yeah, so they're very, very lucky, these guys. The pool they've got at the bottom of the house is actually heated to 20 degrees. So these guys have essentially got their own hot tub, so they're very, very spoiled.
But Jamie, thank you very much for talking
you're welcome.
about our
Thank you.
rhinos here. You got a lot of work to get back on with.
Yes, I do.
And have a good day, folks.
You too. Thank you.
Hello. Oh, good. Hello and welcome back. So we are now hopefully joined by Jess, who is, I think we're just waiting patiently in the noise. There we go. We can see Jess there. How's it going, Jess? Do you want to introduce yourself, Jess? What is it you do at the zoo?
Hi, yes, so I'm Jess. I'm an education officer here at Edinburgh Zoo. So rather than working daily with animals, I usually work with children, which is equally as interesting. And today I'm joining you from the rhino enclosure. So it's great fun. They're actually standing right in front of me having their breakfast. So I can flip my camera around and show you our 2 rhinos. So they've actually moved now quite perfectly for you to see. Hopefully you can tell.
In position,
have a look. So I'll try. I'm not very tall, so I tend to try and hold it up higher, a bit lower. So you can see on the left there is Kabid, who Jamie, our lovely keeper in the video, mentioned, and on the right is Sanjay. And you can see them with a big mountain of hay that they have got to have for their breakfast. And then these piles of food are cabbage and carrots and the food pellets that Jamie mentioned as well. So they've got quite a lovely breakfast to be getting on with while we're chatting about them here.
Yeah, it sounds like a healthier breakfast than mine, to be honest, as well.
Definitely, yeah.
Really, really good.
Very
Excellent.
balanced diet.
I'm just wondering, I wonder if we've got any questions coming in just yet. Remember, folks, if you've got any questions for Jess, please feel free to put them into the YouTube comments section again, and we'll get through as many as we can throughout the session, as well as, like I was saying before, if you wanted to tweet us as well, at GSE1, we should be able to ask Jess questions via that as well if you want to post them to us. But we do have a question coming up if you're ready, Jess, and the first one comes from St. Stephen's Primary, and they ask, are rhinos dangerous?
Well, as Jamie mentioned in the video, they're very, very strong. So they can get up to over 2 tons in weight, which is really, really heavy. And when they're fully grown, they can also lift that amount of weight, and they can also run, as they get up to full speed, about 30 miles per hour. So that's pretty fast, faster than a car in town and heavier than a car in town. So if they were charging at you, you would not want to be in the way. So that can mean that they're dangerous, but they're quite gentle, really. They're not aggressive. The keepers wouldn't be scared of them in the zoo. They don't go into the enclosure with them, as Jamie said, just in case they would get attacked by accident or anything like that. So the only reason they'd be running is if they're frightened or if they're trying to protect themselves or they're young. And that's the only reason they'd be fighting or running at anybody. And you can also see the other form of their defense is the horn, which is right there. So Kabid and Sanjay are only 4 and 5 years old. They aren't fully grown yet, so they will have another few years of growing, and that horn keeps growing their whole lives. So they will still get a bit bigger. It can probably double or triple in size, so they will get quite a bit bigger.
Yeah, certainly. Sorry, go on, you.
Yeah, no, you just need to be careful with rhinos. So that's why our keepers are very good and careful.
I hadn't actually realised when you mentioned that they can lift up to 2 tons as well as obviously their own weight, which is around about 2 tons. Is that right?
Yeah, so they can basically lift their own body weight, which is great if you imagine the males are fighting over a female or some territory and they want to try and hoof another male away, just lift it. So they're quite strong whenever they want to be.
Absolutely. Have you ever seen that happen in the zoo? Did they ever fall out in the zoo?
No. So the 2 boys that we've got are actually great pals. Whenever they do get to the age when they might compete with each other or see each other as competition, basically, they would then be ready to move on to another zoo. So our job is to keep young boys, and they do tend to hang out in groups like this when they're in the wild as well. So we'd have 2 young males, and then whenever they're old enough, when they're about 8 or 9 years old, when they're adults, they will head off to other zoos, and that's where they'll hopefully join a female to take part in the breeding program and have some rhino babies, hopefully.
Amazing, excellent.
So
yeah, so dangerous but not dangerous, depending on which way you look at it. To answer the question,
if you're nice to them and careful, not dangerous.
Excellent, good stuff. Excellent. Do we have another question coming into? Oh, we do. Excellent. The next question is coming from St. Keswick's, and they ask, what makes rhino horns so valuable? What makes rhino horns so valuable?
Well, it's an interesting one because it's kind of just that it's maybe all built around a myth and people's understanding of what a rhino horn can do. So it's very difficult to get a rhino horn to begin with. Like I said, they're very big, and if they're scared of you, they will let you know. So it's hard to get a rhino horn, which makes it that kind of like scarce material that's hard to get access to. And also in ancient traditional myths of maybe Chinese and the Asian medicine, they've got these various medicinal properties that people say that rhino horn has. Lots of them are completely ridiculous ones, but none of them are true. So it doesn't actually have any rhino or any medical properties at all. But it's that sort of sought after material for this ancient traditional medicine that makes it so valuable. It's worth more than its weight in gold. It's so valuable, but it just is all from a myth or also from a status symbol. So because it's so hard to get, lots of people want to have decorations in their home made from rhino horn, which makes them look very wealthy and to say like, look how rich I am, I can afford rhino horn. So that just continues and that encourages it to become more and more valuable. But really, rhino horn is made out of the same material as your hair or your fingernails. So it's called keratin. It's a type of protein, and it's just like your hair and fingernails. So if you imagine people trying to sell powdered fingernails for thousands of pounds, you'd be a bit confused. But people do sell powdered rhino horn, which is much the same material, for incredible prices. So you do find that it's just strange historical reasons really why it's so valuable.
Wow, it's so fascinating, so unfortunate as well. It's yeah, it seems
really
one of those
is.
things. I guess we'll never get to the bottom of why, how it all started, and hopefully we can get to the end of rhino horns being required or being one of those kind of elusive sort of items that everyone wants to get at some point. We'll never know. We've got another question coming in from there. Oh yeah, excellent. So we've got St. Stephen's Primary, and they ask, can rhinos lose their horns naturally?
So rhino horns don't tend to fall off like deer antlers or anything like that. They might be. Have you lost? Am I still here?
No, I think there was a wee bit of a delay there, but I think we can still hear you.
I might have frozen. Hang on. Can you still hear me?
We can still hear you. I'm not sure if you can hear us, but hopefully.
Okay, good stuff.
Yeah.
So they don't tend to lose them naturally, like for example, a deer would. Oh yeah, I've still got you. Sorry, guys. They wouldn't fall off naturally, but they can be damaged, or they can be, for example, in protective wildlife parks, keepers might remove the horn to stop, for example, a poacher coming to take the horn and to kill the rhino to do that. So they might remove the horn. But like I said, it's just like your hair and your fingernails, so it will just continuously grow. So if it does get damaged or any of it is removed for any reason, then it will just grow back, just like your hair and your fingernails would. So just continuously growing, really.
Excellent. And when, if the horns obviously do get removed to stop the rhino being poached, does that have any impact on how it's able to protect itself, or is it still usually okay, or how does that work?
So it can have, because they use the horns to protect themselves, obviously then they are without the natural defense. But this will only happen if they're in, for example, a wildlife park or in a protective reserve. So they're less likely to need to defend themselves in places like that. So you can see Khabib is being tempted outside just now. He's just showing us his rear end. But hopefully Sanjay stays with us for a little bit longer.
Excellent. Yeah, and hopefully we've got another few questions coming in while Sanjay's still there.
Them, maybe handing him a carrot or something.
Tempting him out with the cabbage and the carrots. The next question comes in. It says, we don't have anyone that's a name behind it, but it is, where in the world are rhinos from?
So rhinos come from Asia and Africa. So there's 5 different species of rhino left in the world. There used to be more, but unfortunately several of them have become extinct. But there are white rhinos and black rhinos in Africa, and Javan, Sumatran, and Indian rhinos in Asia. So I might have mentioned, maybe I forgot to say, our rhinos are Indian rhinos, and they're also called Greater One-Horned Rhinos. So these guys will just only ever have one horn, which you can see here. Other types of rhinos like white rhinos and black rhinos will have 2 horns, so that typical one really big one and then one smaller one you might be more familiar with. But our Indian rhinos will only ever grow one. But yeah, Africa and Asia, that they're all from.
That brings me to a question actually about with the rhino species that have existed along with humans. Do you have any idea how many rhino species there are left now compared to how many there maybe were as far as records go back or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I wouldn't have a specific number for you, but there's definitely more that are, well, not more that are extinct, but a few species that have gone extinct. And in the history of rhino development, they used to be quite different. And so that you could see maybe animals, if you've watched films or seen documentaries about prehistoric times, you can see very clear ancestors to rhinos. You can see where they've come from. And you can see their sort of evolutionary history quite clearly through the ages. But yeah, I wouldn't have an exact number, but that'd be an extra question if someone wants to send that on to us afterwards so that I could find out.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good point there as well, Jess. If anyone does have any questions coming up towards the end, if we maybe don't have time to get to yours, you can send any questions you might have about the rhinos to education@rzss.org.uk. But we'll try to get through as many as we can. So let's move on to the next question to see if there's another one coming up. So, how will climate change affect rhinos, Jess?
So that's quite a good question. So rhinos, as I said, they come from Africa and Asia. They come from different types of habitats. So African rhinos will be more from grassland habitats, but Asian rhinos tend to live in rainforest habitats, which both will have quite different climates. So they both rely on it being quite rainy to make sure that the plants that they survive on can thrive and flourish. So any changes in rainfall caused by climate change could cause them quite a lot of trouble. So if there's too much rainfall, an increase in rainfall, they could be affected by flooding, for example, and their habitat might not survive or might change in a way that they can't adapt to. And then if there is a reduction in rainfall and an increase in temperatures, the plants that they rely on and the habitats that they rely on might not survive, or again, might change in a way that they can't adapt to. So both African and Asian rhinos are likely to be affected by changes in the climate. So if you guys are aware of what you're doing to protect the climate, you're protecting a rhino. Every time you do something to protect the climate, you're protecting one of these guys, which is great.
Yeah, it's a really good answer. It's a good point as well that, of course, climate change is often case a domino effect that we don't necessarily think it's directly affecting an animal or a species, whatever it might be, but then that domino effect of eventually makes its way up to them.
There's no direct effect, like the rain won't kill the rhino itself, but it might cause the habitat to change, which is then the knock-on effect. Like we hear about, for example, with the polar bears and the ice caps melting and things like that. So that it's the habitat changes caused by climate change, not the direct impact. So you find that the indirect causes are widespread, unfortunately, but hopefully we can help them.
Yeah, hopefully, wonderful animals. Let's see if we've got another question in. Yeah, we do. So the next question we have is, do the rhinos become friendly with the keepers at the zoo?
Yeah, they really do actually. So they don't go into the enclosure with them, which we already said, but they can contact them through the bars. See, the bars are quite wide. A human fits through the bars, so the keepers can go in to different parts of the enclosures when the rhinos aren't there, but they can also reach in and give them little pats on the nose and things. And as Jamie said in the video at the beginning, they know their names. So when Kabid or Sanjay are called by the keeper, oh, here he comes back in now, they will be responding to that. And so they will sort of answer a call. And they're also quite well trained. Now, you might imagine that it's difficult to train a rhino. Now, we don't train them to do silly tricks or anything like that. But what we will do is train them to be able to show their feet or show their teeth or turn around for the keepers and the vets so that they're able to look after them really well. So the better that the relationship the keepers have with the rhinos, the better care they can give them, basically. So it's just really important that they have that relationship. It's not like giving them a big old cuddle and a hug right up to their, in the room with them, but it is definitely a relationship that they do have with them. And actually, we have Kabid and Sanjay here now, but our last male rhino who left when he was about 9 years old, Bertus, his keeper went with him to Indonesia, to the new zoo where he moved to. So she flew all the way to Indonesia with him in a big, massive plane to keep him company and to make sure that he was looked after so that they have that relationship. And then she was able to talk to the keepers at the new zoo and tell them how she looks after them and all the different things that he likes. And they know everything about them. So they were actually able to pick out Bertus's favorite toy, which was a tire, and take that to his new zoo with him. So they definitely have that lovely relationship. It's so nice to see.
Yeah, certainly. That speaks volumes about the kind of relationship, especially. It's so lovely to hear that essentially she was able to keep him company on the flight and keep him calm and do that kind of handover to people in Indonesia. It's really cool. Excellent. Do we have another question?
It's really cute.
It's really cute. Yeah, you're right. What sorts of things what sorts of things do you do to help rhinos embrace their natural behaviours at the zoo?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. So our main aim at the zoo is animal welfare and conservation. So historically, zoos weren't about that, but now they are. And what we do is try and provide them with a diet that's as close as possible to their natural diet. And as Jamie mentioned in the video, they're given browse, so branches, and they're often hung up high for the rhinos to go out and find them, so they're not just always put in a pile. Now, this breakfast pile is placed here to make sure that the rhinos come down to this house so the keepers can clean the top house, but the rest of their food is just arranged around the enclosure for them to find, so they have to browse literally for their food, and they have then able to use their, as you can see, their big top lips chomping on the food. They can grab the leaves and strip them. And then we also have quite a lot of enrichment in their enclosure. So if you've ever been to the zoo, you'll have seen all sorts of weird and wonderful things in the enclosures with the animals. They're not just sitting in a box by themselves. So part of the enrichment for the rhinos is having each other. So having these two boys together is natural. They would be in these groups in the wild, so that kind of interaction is completely natural. And then we also have lots of things for them to play with. We have sort of like big bouncy balls outside for them to horse around with, which is good for them to engage in that natural play behavior when they're younger. And then we also have, as natural as possible, the sort of the ground under feet. So you can see in the distance behind them, there's all that wood chip, and then outside it's really, really muddy, because they would live in sort of muddy foresty areas when they're in the wild. And as Jamie mentioned, they have their swimming pool. They also have 2 outdoor swimming pools. So in the summer, they can jump in the swimming pool and get covered in loads of mud, and then they let that dry on their skin as sunscreen, which is a lovely natural behavior to see them do, because that's what they do in the wild. Rhinos love to roll around in the mud and let it dry and use that as sunscreen, because if you can imagine, they're not able to rub it on themselves. They've got those huge big feet and they're not very flexible. So they just roll around in the mud, and that protects them from the sun, which is great.
Yeah, so, and that's a similar behavior to the elephants, is that right? Elephants do a similar kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. So elephants, because they have this big thick skin and there's no hair really, there's like very small sharp hairs but no thick hair. So animals that are exposed to the sun quite regularly but have no hair love to just slap on some mud. Like hippos will do it as well, and it's just really good for them to be able to protect themselves, and that they show that natural behavior when they're in the zoo.
Absolutely,
especially he's all the way
if,
out now.
He's gone. He's disappeared off again. Excellent.
Sanjay is still occupied by the food.
Oh yeah, I can see. Yeah, I suppose they are smart animals. Ultimately, if there's an easy meal going, it's very easy for them to just kind of go down there while the keepers clean the top house. Did you say as well? Excellent.
Yes, so the keepers might be cleaning the top house just now, so that's why they're sniffing about.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Do we have another question coming in? We do. Excellent. I think we've got just under 10 minutes left, so there's still quite a few to answer yet.
Okay.
Remember, folks, if you are on YouTube or Twitter, don't be shy. Please feel free to send any more in that you might have, and we'll try and get through them as best we can. So the next question we have, Jess, is we've heard how the rhinos will eat all types of trees. Do they have any favourite Scottish trees or plants at the zoo that they will snack on?
That's such a good question, actually. Do you know, the keepers will give them lots of natural Scottish trees. Green broadleaves they prefer, so they might not necessarily like evergreen trees as much, so they like that green broadleaves. But that's the one that if you wanted to email that to me, at the email that Ross said, I can ask the keeper specifically, and then I can get you the answer straight from the keeper, who I think has disappeared out up the back. But yeah, if you want to send that. They do like green broadleaves, but I don't know if they have a specific favourite. But often it'll be just what the gardens team at the zoo have been able to cut back. If they've been trimming any branches, they give a shout out on the radio to the rhino keepers and say, would they like this type of plant? And the keepers will go, yep, they'll eat it, go for it, bring it on down, and we'll have a big pile of it. But I'm not sure if they have a favourite. But as you can see, he is just they eat all day, basically. When they're not sleeping, they're eating. So they might just eat anything.
It's a hard life. Like that's yep. It's looking good. Excellent. The point that Jess made there as well, folks. I think we'll try to put the email address in at the end on screen so that we can see it. I'll read it out at the end so you can send any questions forward. So the next question from St. Keswick's, they ask, what kind of grades, marks would you need in school to be able to do the job that you do, Jess?
That's a really good question. So my job as an education officer.
Wi-Fi strikes again. Let's see if we can hopefully get Jess back. There might be a bit of a delay by the time she hears this, but we can see a nice freeze frame going on of the rhinos there just while we wait and see what's happening there. So yeah, folks, as I was mentioning before, just while we get Jess back, I think there might be a bit of a technical delay in the meantime, and that's okay. The email address to send any questions on to, if we don't manage to get Jess back in time for the last few questions, is education@rzss.org.uk. The RZSS is the Royal Zoological Society in Scotland. If you're wanting to remember what the RZSS part is. And the education team there, they work incredibly hard with taking in schools, of course, and doing the virtual tours. I think Jess was saying, just as we come on to this, that she's been doing lots and lots of tours, even while the zoo has been closed to the public. I believe it is open again. And so there's lots of opportunities to ask questions that way as well. I think the zoo goes from younger ages, of course, all the way up to much older ages. So any questions that you have, we can, of course, answer them that way. I think we might have lost Jess just now, so we'll just kind of sit by just now. We'll see if we've got any more questions coming in. I don't know if we've actually seen any questions on Twitter yet. Chris, do you know if we've had any? No questions from Twitter yet. But on YouTube, remember, folks, there's lots of different ways that you can send them in, and hopefully we'll be able to get to them that way. Oh, I think we're starting to get Jess back just now. I can see a rhino. I can't see a Jess. There we are.
Hi.
Yep, we've got the rhino.
Sorry, guys.
Hello. No, that's okay. This is all the joys and fun of doing live streaming.
Yeah,
It's quite
sorry
okay.
about that. So, are the rhinos sideways for you as well?
They are. It's a very good angle though. It's yep, we're starting to get them.
Better?
That's better. Yeah.
Sorry, I've had to.
No.
Wi-Fi died, so I've had to connect to a different Wi-Fi. My
Not a problem.
apologies. So I was chatting about the grades that you might need to get into working in a zoo. So you want to try and get your science, English, and maths definitely at Nat 5. And then you can go on to do your hires, but sometimes you can just go straight on to do trainee, keeper apprenticeships and things like that. So you don't necessarily need to go on and get a degree at university to be a zookeeper, but it's getting more and more competitive. So if you're getting on to that, if that's what you really want to do, then I would maybe try and aim to do something like biology or zoology at university to make yourself a bit more competitive to get in to a keeping job. But the best thing to do when you guys are so young now is to start trying to get loads of experience and volunteering and things, and try and do as much as you can with animals, with nature, get out and do litter picks, do wildlife walks and lots of things like that, to make sure that it's what you want. You're interested, and you have shown that you've got this interest in nature and wildlife, and that's the best thing you can do really, is get that kind of thing started now. And then as I say, science and English and maths whenever you're doing your exams in secondary school, but also languages and geography can be quite good, because as I mentioned, the keeper for the rhinos went all the way to Indonesia to deliver a rhino. You might end up in lots of different countries as a zookeeper. So languages can be really useful as well. So it's definitely a good one to look into. Absolutely.
And yeah, that's a really good point. Of course, if you show that it's what you're passionate about and you then volunteer to do stuff, some people I think would imagine that it's for them in the first instance, and then they'll maybe try it out. And that's an equally important part, because you'll find out whether it is for you or whether it isn't from that point, from volunteer. Excellent.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions coming in here just now? Let's see. Yep, we've got another question from St. Keswick's, and they asked Jess, what other animals have you worked with? Which one has been your favourite and why?
So the animals that I actually work with will be small animals for handling. So we sometimes do sessions with school groups and things like that in my job, where we have lots of insects like cockroaches and stick insects, and we've got giant African snails, we've got snakes and armadillos. And my favourite animal that I've worked with is definitely the armadillo, because they are ridiculously cute. So a southern three-banded armadillo, if you're not sure what they look like, go and look it up now. They're so cute. You can hold them in your hands, and they're just absolutely adorable, really fascinating animals. So that's definitely one of my favorites that I've worked with. But yeah, it's all good, really.
An armor-plated one as well, similar to the rhinos. Maybe there's a kind of common theme there.
Oh, yeah.
Is that right?
Maybe the armor plating is my favorite.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impressive. Oh, this is Sanjay sniffing at the window now. He's changed his mind. He's not going. But yeah, definitely the armadillos are my favorites.
Excellent, brilliant. Okay, do we have another question? I think we've got time for a few more, Jess, so let's see if we can get a few more in. So Kaz T from Twitter asks, do the rhino make vocal noise? We've heard them quite quiet so far. Do they make vocal noises?
They're really quiet just now, but they sometimes grunt or almost moo at each other. So it's a bit like a cow sound. Is the best way I can describe it. I won't try and do a sound that they make, because I probably would alarm them. But they sometimes grunt at each other. So I've seen them when they're quite playful on a sunny afternoon. They can be running around and playing with the swimming pool and things like that, and they do kind of moo at each other. I'm not sure what they're saying, whether it's they're explaining the rules of whatever game they're playing, I don't know, but they do a little bit of mooing.
It's that, yep.
Yeah, I think so. A little bit of grunting and mooing from a rhino is not unheard of, so that's the general noise they make.
Good stuff. Excellent. Will we take one more? We go from... Oh no, we've got a few more actually. I don't know why I'm saying one more. We've got a few more to come in yet. sorry, that's from St Stephen's Primary there, Jess, and they ask, have you had experience of dealing with any animals that have been very sick?
So there's a really good vets team in the zoo who will always look after any animals that are sick, and they have the best care here at the zoo, but they can still get sick. So the keepers will keep an eye on the animals always, and if their behavior changes at all, then they'll notice that they're maybe not feeling so well, and they'll keep an eye out for them. So I haven't myself dealt with any animals that have been sick, as my job isn't directly keeping or working with the vets, but there have been instances when the animals have been sick. And just while we're at the rhinos, I mentioned him earlier, Bertus, our last male rhino to leave the zoo. His last sort of vet care that I heard of before he left the zoo was actually quite an interesting story. So, as I said, rhinos are really, really heavy. They can get up to 2.5 tons sometimes when they're fully grown. And this was when Bertus was about 8 years old, so he was really big. And he had a tooth problem. He needed to get surgery on a tooth. Which was causing him pain, and it was making it hard for him to eat. But for them to do the surgery, obviously the rhino needs to be asleep, otherwise they wouldn't be able to do it. So they had to anesthetize him temporarily just so that they could do the surgery. But because his head is so big and so heavy, they actually had to call in the fire brigade to help them to work out a system of how to lift his head up so that the surgeon could go and look at his tooth. So they had the vets, the keepers, the rhino, and the fire brigade all in this little room here to try and get the surgery done to fix Bertus's tooth. He actually, in the end, had to have the tooth pulled. So that was all worked out well, and he was happy as Larry afterwards. But yeah, just the lengths the keepers and the vets go to get the best care for these animals is brilliant.
Excellent. Yeah, I can't imagine what it'd be like having to deal with toothache as a rhino. It's bad enough as a human to deal with it,
I know,
of course.
and your tooth is enormous.
Yeah, well, do you know roughly how big it would be for context?
So
would any like a baseball, or is it bigger or
about the
smaller
size
than
of my
that?
fist, probably. I have small hands, so about the size of a fist would be a rhino tooth. Yeah,
For
quite
one
big.
tooth? Wow. Yeah, it certainly is. Jeez. I've actually had a question to do with I've lost it just now, so maybe we'll move on to another one. It was to do with the rhinos. Oh, that was it actually. Just before we move on to the next question,
Yeah.
it was when the rhinos obviously have something wrong with them. How it's not like humans where we're of course able to tell a doctor or someone that
Yeah.
when they're not feeling right where the pain's coming from, what our symptoms are. So what kind of things do you look out for whenever you're trying to tell if a rhino's well or if it's maybe not quite so well?
So it will be changes in behavior. So like I said, they can show their teeth, they can show their feet, they can turn around, and keepers will know every inch of them basically. And if they're behaving slightly differently, or if they notice any changes at all in their behavior, they'll get a closer look, and they'll get the vets over to keep a really good eye on them as well. So we have a team of vets and vet nurses. I think there's 4 or 5 staff on the zoo, and they're on call for 24 hours a day as well. So it's mainly changes in behavior that the keepers will notice, because with dangerous animals, especially like the big cats or the chimpanzees, you never get really close to them. So they have to just keep an eye out for these kinds of things, and it's mainly looking for changes in behavior and then trying to be a detective and figure out what's causing that change in behavior can be quite difficult. But they always work really hard to do it.
Yeah, and again, I think that goes back to the point you were saying about the relationship that keepers have. It must be that kind of intimate where they would actually know things and just know what to look out for that other people might not notice. So
yeah, exactly.
Really important thing. Excellent. Do we have another question coming in from Twitter or from the YouTube? Let's see. Anything just now? There we go. So another question from Kaz T on Twitter, and they ask, do birds sit on their backs?
Yes, they do. So in the zoo, you might get a crow or a jackdaw coming to sit on their back, and they might give a little nibble to see if there's any insects living on them. And that's actually really useful for the rhinos. So maybe they'll be a bit annoyed if they go and sit on their ear or something like that. But when they sit on their back, it's really useful. It's called this symbiotic relationship. So the rhinos and the birds live together quite happily, and in the wild as well. And so the rhinos get someone who comes and does a little bit of cleaning and gets rid of any annoying insects, and the birds get a safe place to eat some food, because as you can imagine, if they're sitting on a rhino, they're less likely to get snuck up on by any other predator. It's quite a safe spot, and they've got a good vantage point to look out for any predators coming as well. So it's definitely a lovely relationship between birds and rhinos, and birds and elephants as well, you'll see. And it's not just the big guys like elephants and rhinos. You might even see here in the zoo, we've got deer and goats that the birds will sit on and pluck hair out to get for their nests. So this time of year when they're building the nest, or maybe a couple of months ago, you'd see loads of crows just coming along and pulling hair out of the goats and things to get for their nest. It's quite fun to watch.
So it's kind of like nature's own hairdresser stroke masseuse sort of effort thing going on there.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's it.
Wow, brilliant, excellent. Do we have another question coming in at all? Yeah, we do. Oh, this one comes from YouTube, from Darren McCarthy at St Stephen's Primary School. And they asked Jess, how long do rhinos usually live?
So they can live into their teens, actually. So they can be sort of a late teenager, really is quite an old rhino. And sometimes they can get a little bit older as well, but just in the wild, it's maybe less likely for them to get quite old because there's various threats in the wild, not just poachers, but also things like diseases and injury that maybe if there's no vet, obviously, in the wild, they wouldn't maybe get their injuries seen to. So they maybe wouldn't live as long in the wild. But in the zoo, animals tend to live so much longer because they've got constant supply of food, they've got a vet to look after them, and they haven't got any immediate threat that they would have in the wild. So that's why they live a bit longer in the zoo. So yeah, into their late teens and 20s sometimes.
There we go. And where did you say that the two rhinos that you've got, what age are they currently? Because you said they weren't fully grown as well. So what age are they roughly?
So Sanjay, who's here just in front of me, is 4. And then Kabid outside is 5.
Oh, okay. So they've got ages yet, as far as as far as they're not even in their prime years yet. Well,
no,
like you're saying, not
they're
even
still
fully grown.
sort of like toddlers.
It's an interesting scale for a toddler, definitely to think of there. Yeah, it's wow. There we go.
Very enormous toddlers. Yeah.
Very enormous toddlers. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Do we have any more questions coming in? We do. And this question is, what is the oldest animal in the zoo, and can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, so this is actually one of my favorite questions to get, because people are always surprised to hear that the oldest animals in the zoo are some of our flamingos. So flamingos can get to be a great old age, and we've got 3 flamingos that their age that's recorded is that they're going to be 60 this year, which is quite an age. So they were actually taken from the wild, which is not a practice that we do at all in zoos today. But in 1961, it was more common. They were taken from the wild, so they could be even older than 60, because as I say, they were taken from the wild. So the date that's given for their sort of birthday is the day they were taken from the wild in the 60s. So they were brought to a wildlife centre in England, somewhere, I forget where it is now, but somewhere I think they might still have flamingos there. And then they came to us in the 90s. So they've been at Edinburgh Zoo for 30 years now. So half of their life has been spent here, half of it out in the wild. Oh, that's Sanjay saying farewell. I think he's off. He might come back. I'll not follow him just because he probably will come back and make an idiot out of me. So I'll just wait for him to see.
I think he's kind of doing half in, half out. He's got that kind of, he's having a sneak peek and then
it's horrible out there. So I'd be surprised if he decided to go.
Yep, it looks like it is as well.
Yep, he's reversing.
There we go. It'd be interesting if we had like reverse lights or anything. I wonder if you actually used them. No, probably not with those. But in fact, what are the barriers actually made of, Jess? Are they?
They're really strong metal barriers all around the zoo. So they're made of well designed. Every single inch of the zoo is designed specifically for the type of animal that's in it. And all of the gates and all of the bars here are made of really, really thick metal. I'm not sure exactly what type of metal. And as you can see, the slides here that Jamie mentioned in the video, which seems like a while ago now, this door would slide over. So that if the keepers needed to be in the far side for any reason, or to keep the boys in the far side, then they can just slide over. Every single section of the enclosure has a slide to make sure that if they need to close it off for any reason, they can do, and they do it remotely. So the keeper would stand here, which is not in the enclosure, and operate the slide from here. It's probably quite far away to see the little handle. So they never need to be in the same space as the animal.
Sounds pretty safe to me, actually, especially with all this too. Really, really cool. I think we have time for like 2 or 3 more questions, possibly, Jess. So we'll get the first one of those coming in just now, and that is, how fast can the rhinos run if they charge?
Yeah,
I think you might have covered this a little bit before.
Yeah, they do get up to about 34 miles per hour if they're running as fast as they can. Now, in this enclosure, they don't have the space to get up to that speed. So they would run maybe just as fast as we would if we were having a little jog. They're not really fast in here. And they have no reason to run fast in here either, so they don't need that. And they would only, as I say, run fast if they're scared or trying to scare somebody, which they don't do here either. But yeah, over 30 miles an hour. So if you see a car hurtling past you in the town whenever you're heading home from school today or something, and you imagine that's how fast a rhino can go in the wild, and a rhino would probably weigh about twice that. So it's quite a lot. Yeah,
So even to describe it as a truck would be a fair kind of thing. It is like a truck on 4 legs.
Exactly.
That's one way of looking at it.
with a horn on the end.
With a horn, yeah, just to make it even funner. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, we've got a few questions coming in. Another one from Kaz T on Twitter, and they ask, do the rhinos have allergies?
That's a really good question, actually. That might be one for an email as well. I don't actually know if they have any allergies. The keepers tend to feed them the same diet. So they, as we've looked, they've got leaves, they've got hay, they've got carrots, they've got cabbage. They might get a banana as a treat. They don't get much else in terms of their diet. So I'm not sure if their allergies have been explored. But there's probably things that they wouldn't eat. They don't eat meat, so I imagine if they tried to eat meat, they probably would be a bit sick. But I don't know if it's an allergy or if it's just that's not what they're designed to eat. Their bodies aren't designed to digest meat, so they just can't do it. So I imagine if you gave them a bit of meat, they wouldn't. They might not even eat it at all because it's just not food to them. So yeah, it's worth it. If you're keen to know, I can try and ask a keeper and find out. So do
absolutely. Yeah, we'll stick the email at the end, hopefully, and we can any questions that you might have that's a wee bit more tricky to answer. We can certainly, and you might have time after that. We can send questions in via email that way. We've actually got one last question coming up. Jess, are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Okay, and the last question is, what's your favourite fact about rhinos?
Oh, that is a really good question. I mean, I do love almost everything about these rhinos. They're absolutely brilliant. But I think it's the top lip. The prehensile lip is one of my favourite facts, that they use their lip. They don't have any hands, so they can't grab branches themselves. So they use this top lip here. You can see it all sort of stretching out a bit. I'll try and get a good view. They use that to grab onto branches, pull them into their mouths, and then they strip the leaves off that way. So it's like an animal that can't have any hands. They've got these massive hooves instead. Their lip has evolved to be their hands, basically. So that's one of my favourite things about them.
Wow, excellent. Yeah, it's certainly very cool. And I think it's an interesting point to make because at the start, for anyone that's watching this just now, at the start of the video, I think the one that Jamie did, they get a real close-up of the lip. I don't know why I'm trying to do it as if my lip's the same size as a rhino's, but yeah, you could saw it at the start. So if you wanted to go back at the start of this live stream, you can, of course, rewatch it again as many times as you want, folks. You might be able to see it a bit closer up there as well, but we've got a good angle there from Jess just now as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Jess, and of course to the rhinos there as well. Like we were saying before, folks, if you do have any other questions, any burning questions that we didn't have time to cover in this session, feel free to send any questions on to education@rzss.org.uk. And I'm sure Jess, the education team, or in fact, maybe even any of the keepers would be happy to answer them. But thank you very much again, Jess. Thanks for your time. We'll no doubt see you all again very soon. But hopefully, thank you very much. Yeah, excellent. And thank you very much to all for tuning in as well. We'll see you another time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Cheers.